Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Negotiation. As we start counting down to the 2022 Winter Games in Beijing, we are going to start mixing in some guests who are playing a pivotal role in what is becoming a national movement to grow the culture of sport in China at a rapid pace. This episode is part one of our two-part series talking with Freddie Bacon, Director of Sport Development at Axis Leisure Management. We talk with Freddie about his experiences running snow sport schools in China and how far the ski hills themselves have come in such a short period of time. We discuss the various methods snow sports is growing in China and the factors that are driving that growth. We talk about what it's like to learn to ski or snowboard in China, diving into everything from costs of lessons, parental involvement, the economics of lessons and how they differ in China, and where China can possibly find enough instructors to meet the huge demand. Enjoy.
What happened is, as ski resorts started to emerge here, pricing was developed perhaps based on the quality of instruction people were receiving, which back at that time, even if we look 10, 15 years ago when the first resorts were emerging, there really wasn't any certification. And it was basically people that could ski would then be teaching other people to ski based on what they thought was a way to do it. Since then, the amount of certification and qualification and training of instructors has drastically improved. And I actually personally believe that many snow sport schools are grossly undervaluing their instructors and their professional ski and snowboard instructors that are trying to make this a career, of which there are a growing number of people in China doing that.
Home to over 4 billion people, the Asia-Pacific region boasts one of the most powerful consumer markets on the planet. Not only is it home to half the world's under 30 population, but it's also home to more than half the world's internet users. It's a market no globally minded brand should ignore, but entering markets like China is no easy task. Just ask the likes of Microsoft, Google, Uber, and Facebook. Times are changing, and with the right partners, doors are slowly opening as more and more companies find success expanding into the markets of the Middle Kingdom. I myself spent 8 years in China, mostly as a venture capitalist, helping early-stage tech companies enter the Asia-Pacific market successfully. This show is dedicated to uncovering and examining successful China entry and growth strategies by interviewing the people behind those success stories. My name is Todd Embley, and welcome to The Negotiation, brought to you by WPIC Marketing and Technologies. Freddie, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having me. Really, really happy to be here.
As we usually do, we'd love to have an introduction into yourself and how you ended up doing business in China.
Yeah, thanks. So my name's Freddie Bacon and I'm from the UK. I've been working in the ski industry specifically since 2007. Back in 2014, I was working in New Zealand, and a colleague of mine had been in touch with a business over here about potentially coming to China. And as we sort of looked into it more, we realized it was going to be quite a challenging project. And he asked if I would join him. And then we together gathered a team from our company in New Zealand, and we came over here and we established a ski school in a brand new resort that it was still in the process of construction when we arrived. But we built their international ski school for them. And that was back in 2014, 2015.
I'm interested to know, because we cover schools. We've talked actual schools, in education. We've talked hockey schools. We've talked soccer schools or football schools. There's all kinds and it's very, very interesting. I think sports is super, super fascinating when it comes to China. It's been there. It hasn't been there. It's part of the culture. It hasn't been part of the culture. It's part of education. It's part of family. It's not. And then, of course, China being such a huge fraction, kind of different areas of the country being different cultures, different dialects, the whole thing, right? And then you've got mountains in one region and you've got plains in the other region. Let's talk a little bit about the specifics of snow sports schools. Okay, so how has the experience been running these schools in China? How is it different than other places you potentially have worked and run sports schools, or know of how they're run in other places of the world?
Yeah, it's a really, really interesting question. I think the first point to make is that actually, fundamentally, snow sports schools in China are, to all intent and purposes, very similar to as you'd find anywhere else in the world. I think what is different with schools in China is perhaps the expectations of students. And I think we often talk about sort of the concept of safety, fun and learning. And I think perhaps in China, with the subtle cultural differences that you touched upon there. The emphasis is perhaps more on safety learning and fun being the latter. And people are more interested in ensuring that they actually have very tangible learning outcomes from when they pay money to go into a school to learn something. Whereas I think in other resorts that I've worked globally, from America to Japan and Europe and New Zealand, there's definitely people are paying money to go and have a fun experience. So I think that's a key difference. The other difference is in the staff. So perhaps in North America and let's say established ski markets, being an instructor is something people choose to do generally when they're very passionate about the sport. It's a tool to be able to get yourself a free lift pass, live in a resort town, and be able to enjoy your days off on the mountain. Perhaps not work full days and just be able to really enjoy the lifestyle. But in China, being an instructor, there's less passion, I'd say, amongst instructors. It's very much viewed as a job, and I think unfortunately the reality is that it's actually it's a way to make a quick buck without needing to have too many formal qualifications at this stage, and that's something we're working very hard to change and develop the emphasis on the importance of certification for instructors, because obviously with higher certification quality, the better products they're going to deliver within their respective schools. And so that's something we as an organization are working very hard on with our partners to increase the certification standard across snow sports here in China.
So often, I hate to say it, and I'm guilty of this myself with my kids, but schools of all types, and even just after school activities and things, we're just trying to keep them busy. And sometimes, we're almost, thinking of them as, a glorified bit of a daycare to give it a break, to get them to do something while, and then even sometimes when we think of up at the ski hills, now I love chasing my kids through the trees and going bushwhacking and some things with that. I actually really love skiing with them, but I know that a lot of other parents love to put their kids in school so they can go and do their own skiing and do it on their own time, or potentially, relax at the chalet or something like that. What is that culture like with China? When you are working with the kids, where are the parents? What are they up to? Is there a different kind of mode or mandate that you work under providing these services in China?
Yeah, it's another really interesting question. And there are huge differences between other resorts globally. I've worked on lots of kids programs, everything from just kids ski school day lessons all the way through to week-long camps. And what we have in China across the majority of major resorts here are very similar programs. Parents generally buy private lessons for their kids here. Group lessons are something that they're not very popular. I think if you were to look at the business model of most ski schools globally, group lessons are where the majority of the money is made. In China, people do not want to have their kids learning with potential strangers, or they don't want to put themselves into a group where there's going to be other members of the public. People definitely want to have a more private learning experience. And so I think with that, there's definitely an expectation for increased speed of progression. And what we find often is that parents will want to watch whilst the lesson's taking place. And so I've witnessed this several times where somebody will book the lesson and then basically shadow the instructor the whole way through. But you're absolutely right that parents in other places will drop the kids off at ski school and then use that opportunity to go and relax in the chalet or go skiing themselves. But I do find there's a bit of a difference here, and it's again a cultural difference that I think the parents are more interested in looking at the progression that the child's making than actually going off and enjoying their free time. And often it's not just the parents, often there's grandparents in tow too. There are winter camp and summer camp products, which I'm sure you've seen as you've been in China for so many years. And they are, those products are where the parents will drop the kids off at a bus station in Beijing, and they will go away for 5 days or a week and then back to Beijing. And whilst skiing is one of the activities, and snowboarding is one of the activities in those camps, there are lots of other activities. And I think they're kind of designed, I think their main purpose is to develop sort of independence in the kids and give them some other life skills. And so I think in that situation, parents are comfortable to let the kids go off on their own. But when they're actually on a family day trip or a family weekend trip to the resorts, it's very important for many families here to actually remain involved with the lesson and ensure the kids safe and basically watch their progression.
There's a different economic approach in China compared to, I think, here in the West. Like if I'm a parent and I'm going up to the ski hill and I look at that price of a one-on-one lesson, and then I look at the prices for group lessons, and now, and I will admit my background of being heavily involved in sports growing up, I understand that there's telling you how to do something and then you practicing it, and then the instructor course correcting or adding on or evolving, and then more practice. And so I guess maybe I seem to think that there's some value in the group lessons, given how much cheaper they are versus the one-on-one. However, I know that the one-on-one would be far more valuable. I just don't know if I see the ROI on spending for private one-on-one versus group. Now, in China, given that they far prefer the one-on-one because they don't want the distraction, they want them. Is there no price correction on the menu so that you can, if you're, if the money is really made through the group lessons, is there no ability to price correct, or is that's still in progress and it is still happening? Because that is a different market where there's so much more demand for the one-on-one. Is there price increases? Is it priced higher than it would be in North America, for instance?
Yeah, so another really good question there. And I think the first thing I can say is that I have data from multiple resorts that shows that 97% of all lessons sold are one-on-one private lessons, and then 3% being other and group. So compared to other markets, the difference it's just night and day. So it's almost all lessons taught in China are private. With regards to the price, we're actually, it's in a strange situation where there's a bit of disparity between pricing in China, in Chinese resorts versus what you would expect to find in European and North American resorts, in the sense that lift pass prices here are very expensive and sort of on par with perhaps French resorts. But if you look at Japan, lift pass prices are much cheaper than they are in China. However, in Japan, a ski instructor for a full day private would be more than double the price of what a ski instructor is for a full day private in China. And I think what happened is, as ski resorts started to emerge here, pricing was developed perhaps based on the quality of instruction people were receiving, which back at that time, even if we look 10, 15 years ago when the first resorts were emerging, there really wasn't any certification. And it was basically people that could ski would then be teaching other people to ski based on what they thought was a way to do it. Since then, the amount of certification and qualification and training of instructors has drastically improved. And I actually personally believe that many snow sports schools are grossly undervaluing their instructors and particularly their professional skiing and snowboard instructors that are trying to make this a career, of which there are a growing number of people in China doing that.
That number of, what was it, 97% are one-on-one?
97%, yeah.
That is incredible. So the one thing that I start thinking about next is, how is there possibly enough instructors to prevent for a school or a sports or a snow hill, a ski hill, to be able to provide that many one-on-one lessons?
Yeah, that's great. It's true. There are times in winter in most resorts where I think they could perhaps triple, quadruple the number of instructors they have and still and still have demand, particularly with the larger resorts that are now sort of seeing 6, 7, 8,000 skier visits a day. Lots of these resorts will have anywhere between 150 and 300 instructors. Busy days over, national holidays and perhaps some of the peak season weekends, they will sell all of those instructors in one day. There are some operational differences and some slightly odd nuances here in the fact that customers very much dictate to schools as and when they go out on their lessons. And this is one of the projects I'm involved in now. We're actually trying to portray a bit of a different story to our customers and to help us manage the business slightly better and actually have lessons going out at set times or within a certain time period. Because what happens is a customer will turn up at the snow sports school desk at 11:30 and then want to have a 3-hour lesson. And what that does with that time period is it basically takes that one instructor out of action to be able to teach any other lessons in that day. And so you're only getting 3 hours worth of value from that one instructor. And by the time he or she comes back from their lesson, it's too late in the day to sell another lesson. Whereas if that lesson had gone out earlier in the morning, then of course you would have been able to service another customer in the afternoon and get more people going through the snow sports school. So there's definitely some operational reasons for needing so many instructors. And the flip side to that is you could actually reduce your headcount, but deliver perhaps the same, if not more lessons to customers. The number of private lessons is huge, but I think it's important to mention that there are actually there are group programs that happen. As you know, the central government here is looking to get 300 million winter sports participants, and in doing so, what's happened in a lot of provinces is the local governments are getting school kids. And what's fantastic about this is it's often school kids from fairly disadvantaged or less affluent areas to go to a ski resort and have a ski experience. And what that ski experience looks like is generally arrive at the resort in the morning, get the rentals, meet your instructor, and go out on snow for the morning, come back in, have a lunch, bit of play in the afternoon, and then back out on snow before going back to school. So it's a really great sort of full day ski or snowboard snow experience for these kids. And at one point I was involved with a resort and we were having 5,000 kids from local schools arrive every day. Sorry, 500 kids a day, 500 a month.
Still a lot.
Yeah. We were doing huge numbers, and the amount of instructors we needed just to be able to take care of that kids program it was a big operation to manage.
I bet. Yeah, still so many questions. I remember the very first day I went snowboarding, that's not a day that I would like to go back and revisit. So for these kids that are being brought up for that one day, if they've never done it before, maybe not the best sales tactic on getting them in, 2-3 days. I could see when you're finally not going down the hill on your butt the whole time. But I could see that, and it's a very interesting approach.
No, you're absolutely right there. This is a global issue. You think about skiing being fun and snowboarding being fun, and there's often the expectation versus reality are very different. I think for somebody that's not been to the mountains before, there's an expectation in their head of beautiful blue sky, gliding down the mountain, wind in your face, lovely alpine restaurants and beautiful food and wine. The reality is when you get to a resort, and I say this is a global issue, it's not anything specifically related to China, is that often you end up in a line to buy a lift pass, and then you end up in another line to get your rental gear. And then if you're going to the snow sports school, perhaps there's a line there that you need to wait. And by the time you actually get on snow, you've potentially been through a huge amount of stress, lots of queuing. You may have not known exactly where or when you needed to go. And the whole process could have been quite stressful. And then, of course, you go outside and you strap either a plank of wood to both feet, or you clip into two skis and your feet are sliding all over the place. And suddenly you're going, this is actually very, very difficult. I'm not sure how much fun this is. And there's all of these things as you go through, which, And then obviously you potentially fall over and you go, ouch, this is really, I've just spent $5,000 to bring my family here for a week. And going off the first 3 hours of this experience, I want a refund, of which I can't get a refund. And so that expectation versus reality is where resorts need to kind of, this is where a lot of the focus is going into staff training, is how do we ensure retention? And when these customers come, and in the first time market is the biggest market, it's the market that you need to retain and ensure that they come back, building a future business. But as I say, often the experience versus reality is so different. And in that process, that's where resorts globally lose customers, and the retention and the overall participation of winter sports isn't what it could be based on experiences. So I may have not explained that very well.
No, I think you did. It was interesting because I was just thinking back and making a bit of a tongue-in-cheek comment, which led to, I think, a very kind of real understanding of a morning in the life of somebody coming for the first time. And this is very true. This is the expectation. You have these expectations of what you've seen in the movies, and then you get there. And I mean, you're lucky if it's not snowing. I mean, this is generally winter conditions after all, and you are on a mountain. So wind and snow and inclement weather is the norm usually. So, and then it is a hard thing to do and get used to. And it's not like it's not like you're learning soccer or basketball where you can generally get away with using functioning muscle memory that you learned for just generally getting around in life. This is actually quite different, and it's all new. So it's not easy. Is there, and I say this with all the love in the world, but sometimes, the perception is that parents in the East can be somewhat overbearing. And I think this is, a kind of a bit of a, from the wild one child policy that used to be in effect. It was just, all that love, all the attention, all the anxiety, all the hopes and dreams, for what your child can be are kind of land on that one set of shoulders. And, so then, I'm wondering, how does that manifest itself when it comes to skiing or ski schools and snowboard schools and snow sports schools? What are you potentially noticing, in how, parents are looking, out for what they're going to get out of putting their kids into those? And, how are those, what are the expectations? How do you manage their expectations? You have this client customer kind of relationship where, the customer is the parents, but the client are the children. And, what does that kind of look like, and how do you manage that?
Yeah, there is a huge piece to play on managing expectations, and I think aligning expectations from before going out on snow. Something I've witnessed a lot in multiple resorts here is a client, whether it be a parent or an adult taking a lesson, saying to the coach or the instructor, "I want to go to the top of the mountain." And what I've unfortunately seen all too many times is that coach being slightly unconfident perhaps, and not willing to turn around to the customer and say, "No, that is not what we're going to do." And they often want to please the customer as best they can and take the customer to the top of the mountain. And the customer may say, "Well, I want to ski down there. I'm paying you. Therefore, you need to get me to ski down there." And then they start skiing down the slope that they should not be on their first day or second day skiing or snowboarding. And of course, have an all-time awful experience. And then in many cases, turn around and blame the coach. And there's this very vicious circle of kind of the cultural issue of staff, employees not wanting to let the customer down or disagree with the customer. But then also on the customer side is wanting this to be able to achieve something that's, would usually take a long time, but instantly. And it can often be for the perhaps silly reason of taking a selfie on top of the mountain. And so that there are ways to manage this. But I think what we've done in the past is we've actually said to instructors, right, you take your students up there, but you don't take ski equipment or snowboard equipment with you. So you go up on the gondola, you take your photos, the selfies, and then you take the gondola back down. And we actually, in one of the schools I was working at, we actually had to implement quite strict staff performance measures to ensure that they were not, we call it overtraining, taking students onto terrain that they shouldn't be on, because it was happening all too often and our injury rates were high. But also then on the other side is the complaints. Customers go, well, this is awful. Your instructors aren't very good. And it actually has nothing to do with the quality of instruction. It's the situation that's been created by them wanting to go ski down a slope or snowboard down a slope that was far above their ability level. And I think the key cultural difference here, perhaps in China and North America and Europe, is if an instructor said to a student, no, we're not going up there because it's dangerous, then that would be received and understood by the customer. But I've seen all too many times here where that's not the case and still go, no, up you go. And just really, I think it's that, I don't know how to describe it, but striving for excellence. It's a mentality I think people really want to achieve and be successful in everything they do. And so it's not necessarily always a bad thing, but when safety is involved, it's definitely something that needs to be considered more so in resorts across China.
I know that in North America, and just because I'm familiar with more North America, and you might be able to speak more to Europe or EMEA, but skiing as well as hockey and some other sports, especially when it comes to winter, are somewhat cost prohibitive for everybody to be able to enjoy, which is why you see just so many more participants in summer sports or sports like soccer or basketball and baseball, things that can be enjoyed by more people in more areas of the world for drastically less upfront costs in equipment or facility rentals or usage. What does that look like in China? Is there still a cost barrier to more and more people being able to enjoy snow sports?
Yeah, I'd say that it's very similar here to anywhere else in the world in terms of the cost barrier. I don't have data to support this, but I would almost think that it's perhaps even more so. The divide here between the customers at resorts and the employees in terms of incomes is absolutely huge. And if you go to resorts, you look at the car parks. The car parks are all very nice cars, similar to what you would find in North America and a lot of European resorts. That is the major resorts, however. I do think what's being done very well in China is there are areas being created that are more mass market, where they don't charge a fortune. They can package together lift, rentals, and an instructor for a very affordable price. And these are the sorts of places that government groups or businesses and schools can send mass amounts of students to experience snow sports. The challenge there is that I think whilst there's lots of experience going on and there's lots of people that are being able to actually go to the mountain and ski, it's that retention piece. How do we get those people coming back? And if there is an economic difference, how are they able to actually become lifelong skiers and snowboarders and winter sport participants? And I think perhaps the market here is a little bit too immature to really make a sound sort of judgment on this situation. And post-Olympics is going to be really interesting to see what happens. Does skiing and snowboarding continue to grow? Or will the hype around it kind of soften off? And in that case, then perhaps the divide between the cost barrier, perhaps that will grow. Or perhaps resorts will need to change their business models and chase more numbers rather than yield. And if that's the case, then maybe you will see more people getting into snow sports. But I would say that as is the case anywhere else in the world, it is a hugely expensive process to go skiing. And particularly if you have a family, even for a weekend to go to the resorts, by the time you've covered hotel, lift passes, it's not a cheap endeavor. And so whilst there are millions of people in China that can afford that, there's also millions that can't. And I think what would be great is for the resorts and for the partners we work with, we do think that there is an element of community responsibility, and it's if it's done right and the experience is good, skiing and snowboarding, yourself, they're fantastic things to be a part of. We would love to be able to be involved in getting more less affluent individuals into the sport, and finding out and looking to work on sustainable ways to continue that and ensure that we can have mass participation.
I will say this, as a parent, my children are 8 and 10, and I do plead for them to enjoy two sports, and that is golf and skiing or snowboarding. And the reason is that we can enjoy those two things almost our entire lives, and we can do them together as a family. I am not the taxi driver that I usually am for baseball, hockey, gymnastics, piano. It is something we can ride in a golf cart. We can sit on the tee box. We can be on the chair. We can eat lunch. I can chase them down the hill and through the trees, and I can participate and enjoy almost every ounce of that experience and that day. And it's a day that we spend together as a family doing something active. And for those reasons, I absolutely love it. So, rant over. That's just my little PSA to those that have our parents have young children. Do we see that happening in China?
Yeah, that's what is happening now. People are realizing just the huge amounts of fun, and for all the reasons you just mentioned there, that this is something that you can do all winter in groups, whether that group be family or groups of friends. And that's something we're seeing a huge amount of emergence is clubs, ski and snowboard clubs, or even just snow sports clubs, where people are getting together with mutual interests, and they're working together with the resorts then to negotiate on things like hotel rooms and pricing, and they're making it a bit more accessible for the whole club so they can go skiing and snowboarding more. And you see this group culture, I think, is really emerging, and people having fun together, just like you mentioned there with your family.
Great. Thanks for entertaining that little dalliance. But it's something that I've come to the realization of. Wouldn't have thought of it before I had kids. And then once I became a glorified taxi driver, then I started to realize, hey, I think we need to shift gears in a couple areas so that we can spend more time as a family whilst still maintaining this active lifestyle. That's it for part 1 of our chat with Freddie Bacon, Director of Sport Development at Access Leisure Management. Be sure to tune in next week when we talk all about Freddie's current initiative, the Burton Snowboard Academies, how technology is being used to improve customer experiences at ski hills in China, and his thoughts on the upcoming 2022 Winter Olympics and the impact it's had on the world of snow sports in China. Growing a company is hard. Doing it in a foreign market? Exponentially so. The best piece of advice I can give you is not to do it alone. When you start looking across the pond for further expansion possibilities, and I sincerely hope that you do, make sure you choose the right partners to do it with. My good friends at WPIC Marketing and Technologies have almost 20 years of experience helping brands just like yours enter China. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Negotiation, and if you're interested in being a guest or want to connect with me or any of our team, please reach out to us at podcast@wpic.co, and be sure to rate, comment, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. 再见。